Hello, and welcome to another episode of Beyond Wellness Culture. Ladies, I'm so excited for you to hear my guest today. You are going to be hearing from Bekah Yawn, who has helped over 100 women and couples navigate fertility challenges. And she does this nationwide. So if you're listening to this and you're like, oh my gosh, that's me, I don't know how I can work with her, stay tuned. Keep listening because you will be able to. And she does this through cycle education and natural hormone support. She has a background in psychology and a training as a FEMM educator, a fiat hormone coach, doula, childbirth educator. And she's known for helping women understand their bodies through both a scientific and a faith-based lens, which is so huge on this show. She leads women through her signature program, the Fertility Framework, where they learn how to support their hormones and prepare for pregnancy naturally. Bekah, thank you so much for being on the show. I'm so excited you're here.
Thank you so much for having me, Dr. Brook. It's really an honor. Thank you.
Yes, I'm so excited for this conversation. And the reason I say excited, this is a really heavy thing a lot of women, even today, walk through. I think the number continues to increase year to year with people experiencing fertility issues and struggling and wanting and desiring these families and not being able to have them in what they feel traditional ways. But before we get into all these different things that you teach and talk about, I really want you to take things backwards and let our listeners know who you are and how you even got into this space. What's your story?
Thank you. Well, you reading my bio made me sound really cool. So thanks. Wow. Maybe I'll have to have you record for my podcast. Well, yes, I'm Bekah Yawn. I'm host of For the Love of Hormones podcast. I'm a mother of 4 babies here on earth and 3 in heaven. I've been married for 10 years and I practice as just in short a fertility coach and also as a birth doula local in my area. So that's the snapshot of me. We got into this because of our own losses. So we had 2 babies and then we had 3 miscarriages. It was a 15-week loss and then we had 2 chemical pregnancies, which are early miscarriages, back to back. And we were not given answers, unfortunately, by our doctor. And I had a really great friend who pushed me to say, get some answers. You can get more support than, well, we just don't know and we can't help you. So fortunately, the Lord led us to number 1, learning what natural family planning was, because we really needed a time to not conceive so that we could figure out what was going on with my body and how to get healing without getting pregnant again. We learned what natural family planning was. We picked a method for ourselves and used it, and we're amazed that it worked. And it was not artificial birth control. And then I also got myself a hormone coach. She's actually the founder of the Fiat Institute. So I was really lucky that she got to be my hormone coach. And she just helped me with little things. And she also helped me recognize that I'd been living with postpartum anxiety for a year and a half. And I got so much healing in this 6-month period and learned how to not just how to chart my cycle. I was kind of a geek with things. I learned how to chart my cycle, but I learned more and more and more things about what my cycle was telling me about my hormones and ovulation and all of that. And about 6 months into everything, my chart was looking really good. I was feeling a lot better. And we got a piece from the Lord to try to get pregnant again. And so we did. It was so incredible to know the day and the hour that God knit together our daughter in my womb. And that was a beautiful pregnancy, a healthy one. And we switched from a hospital planned birth to a home birth with a Christian midwife. And it was a 2-hour start to finish glorious experience. And it was so life changing for me that it made me want to become a doula. And so that's what's kind of carried me into that realm. We did have another baby, and this is always kind of a note of sadness, but that pregnancy and birth was really traumatic. It was very hard. It was very difficult. So it was a whole other thing. But I've taken it to say for my story, I help women try to get pregnant. I get loss. I get having to wait to get pregnant. I get having a glorious birth experience, having a disconnected birth experience in the hospital, and having a really, really hard traumatic birth experience, praise the Lord, still at home. It would have been a C-section if I'd been in a hospital, no doubt. So I have a broad space of experience, and what keeps me grounded is my faith and understanding why do we suffer infertility and where is our hope? and it is in Jesus
Mm.
Christ and how he came and he redeemed everything that was born of the suffering from Genesis 3 after Eve had her sin consequence dished out. It was so redeemed through Mary and through Jesus, and it's going, all of our sorrows will wash away when he comes back in his second coming. So that's what I'm here to help women with, both physically and spiritually.
My gosh, so beautiful. So much stuff to unpack. And I just want to acknowledge and I just want to say this to you, and the listeners are going to get to hear me say this to you. But I love how the Lord has taken such a really hard, difficult season in your life and has turned it into true beauty and has given you the mantle to carry to help other women walk through this. Like, okay, Becca, this is going to be part of your testimony and this is what you're going to bring people through in their miraculous work. And sounds like that's what you've also been doing. Like I was reading even in the bio, hundreds of women and babies that are now here as a result of this beautiful work. So thank you so much for sharing that. What a story. And I love just how anchored you are into your faith because it is important to not just look at things physically. We have to look at them in other realms as well. And it's something I teach: physical, spiritual, emotional, mental. All four pillars have to be standing in order to truly be healthy. So, a lot of the women that listen to this podcast are extremely overwhelmed and they are checking all the boxes. They're doing all the things. They're high achieving women. They're in the workplace or running their business or taking care of their family, right? And some of them are in a place, as I mentioned, that do want babies so bad. And they are almost essentially trying to control everything. I know you mentioned something in your story about natural family planning. And while I want you to talk about that a little bit, because I know some of the listeners might be confused, especially since I speak about like, don't get so rigid in all of the tracking. It's important. It's absolutely important to use tools that we have. But when we put those tools in the place of God and they become the idol, that becomes a problem. We need to actually steward the tools that we've been given really well. And so I really want you to speak into the natural family planning just for a second, because I think that that would be helpful for people because, yeah, they need to know more about what that is
Absolutely.
and the good aspects of it.
Yeah, no, and preach it to the choir, Dr. Brook. This is great. um, so I'm a FEMM educator. It stands for Fertility Education and Medical Management. It's one of the newer fertility awareness methods out there. There's 5 to 7 that you can learn and apply. And I think number one, what I would speak this truth into with all the tracking devices and apps and all of this is number one, if you have not gotten education in one of those fertility awareness methods, you are missing the boat. So if you're only relying on an Aneto device or Mira or LH tests and the basal body temperature things, whichever one you're using, the temp drop, or you're relying on the natural cycles app or all the flow, I've heard of all of it. I've seen all of it. And it's just like, y'all, oh my goodness, you need to partner the tools with the education. I like to use this analogy of learning a language. There are devices that we can use to help us learn a language. But if we never take a course in it or immerse ourselves in that culture, we're never going to learn that language. We can have the Duolingo app. We can have the little Spanish monkey that talks to us. We can have all the frou-frou things to help us learn Spanish. But y'all, if we don't have a Spanish professor walking us through the way, the method for how to learn and going through it in a formalized educational way, we're not going to learn in addition to being immersed in the culture. All right, language is a tiny bit different. And I know you're going to totally vibe with this because you talk about this. Your body speaks, your body has a language, and we have to listen to it. And as a fertility awareness educator, I'm like, y'all, this is how you learn the language of your body. I'm a little bit biased to FEMM because it does spend a lot of time on educating the why and the what behind the chart, which is really helpful. The PowerPoint presentations are beautiful. The images and graphics are wonderful with all of the 3 FEMM education sessions. So number one, that's what I'm going to say is if you haven't had the formal education in FEMM or Creighton or symptothermal or whatever you pick, you're missing it. And it's going to leave you really confused. You're going to be relying on ChatGPT and Googling, and it's just a bunch of hogwash because it's not a professor. It's not a person. We have to stop relying on technology and devices. We have to learn from people. There's a time and place for technology. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing, if you're hearing me say all this and you're like, well, Becca, I am charting with Creighton or I am charting with FEMM. Okay, well, let me talk to you now. So maybe you know how to chart everything, and there is a season for charting. So whenever I have people come into my program, I vibe with wherever they're at because maybe they have been crazy charting or maybe they don't know anything. So if they don't know anything and we don't know anything about your cycle and your hormones and your ovulation, yes, we're going to chart. There's going to be a season for it. And I kind of prepare everyone. You're going to be really excited about this and you're going to love this and you're going to obsess a little bit, but don't obsess too much. I try to tell everyone you track for the day, you take your emotions out of it, and we only analyze a full cycle. We do not analyze every day. Otherwise, we're going to get overloaded and stressed and wondering and Googling. We don't do that. We analyze a whole cycle because that tells us the whole picture of what was going on. And there is a time to Sabbath and to take a break from charting and using devices. So sometimes I have had clients, sometimes they'll repeat working with me. Maybe I've had them for a year or two, and they just need a break. And I get it. We all need a break from things in our lives at times. And so sometimes it is good to take 2 to 3 months off and then get back into things. So I hope I hit kind of all the different areas of your question there.
You absolutely hit all the different aspects of that and so beautifully spoken and beautifully said. One of the things I have to say when you were talking about the tracking devices and how people taking the Sabbath, taking the moments where you kind of peel away and you're just like, hey, like taking the break because sometimes, and one of the things you mentioned as well is you may have not used this exact word, but it's obsessing over the data, right? You can't just look at it each day and you have to peel back the emotions and you have to look at it like a big picture, a big span of data. And every single cycle can look different too, depending on what kind of stuff is going on in your world. If you're under a lot of stress, that cycle is going to look completely different than when your work environment is a little less stressful and they hired a new person that's going to take over half the work that you were doing, right? Or maybe you had a death in the family and things were happening. I liked when you were talking about taking it in even a couple months span and looking at it like that because you were mentioning people working with you for a year, or I guess go into that a little bit more because if I was hearing that as a listener, I would go, okay, like, what does it look like to kind of work with this fertility framework?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So those are the special clients, I call them, right? Typically, it's usually not that long. So Fertility Framework as a whole, it's a 3-month program. You get one module released per week. You get the whole FEMM education in it, and then you get the fiat hormone coaching in it. And then we do bougie charting. So I do teach you all of the stops in addition to what you learn with FEMM. And we have a Bible study throughout the whole program. So that way we can learn from women in the Bible and their fertility journeys. Who handled it well? Who didn't? What can we learn from them? Because there's a lot in there. It's a 3-month program. We have group coaching and we can do one-on-ones and write up a hormone support plan. For the women who come into the program and maybe they've been dealing with hormone imbalance, maybe they've had low progesterone, maybe they've had estrogen dominance, PCOS. Hopefully, Lord willing, they're not dealing with endometriosis, but maybe they are, and maybe nobody's ever suggested it to them or talked to them about it. But just depending on what they're dealing with, if it's just hormones with some light root issues, it should take a few cycles of hard, disciplined change, right? Yes, I am going to recommend changing up a diet potentially, talking about what you're drinking, talking about what your stress patterns are in your life, talking about your faith and your walk with Jesus and what's your movement look like. We bring in all the things into play. And if things are off and they're not vibing with what your hormones are doing, then we just bring that to the table. So if you're super estrogen dominant, and you never work out. So you might be estrogen dominant if you have just crazy rage, you have a hard time sleeping, you just feel kind of angry all the time. It's like you kind of have that buzzy, always a little bit overstimulated about you. Maybe you have some acne going on. So those are signs of estrogen dominance. And if you're dealing with that and you're not working out, I'm going to be like, girl, we got to move. So I might be suggesting to walk after meals, to lift some weights and just do some good movement throughout the day, good exercise program. And then on the flip side, if your hormones are totally burnt out, it's gonna be like, honey, you need a Sabbath. You need to rest. You need to have really slow movement, good movement, but really slow movement. And it all comes down to listening to your body, which is what you preach on this podcast. Good golly, I can't even remember what your original question was. I think you were talking about the fertility framework and what that looks like. So in some cases, the journey takes longer, right? So there are the beautiful cases where it's like, okay, I changed these things up and this is just what my body needed. And we get pregnant, we have a healthy pregnancy and it's beautiful. And that happens often. And then there are times when women come and they need to learn all of those foundational things in their life and change up some habits and change up some routines, change up the lifestyle. And they might be dealing with something deeper medically that we need to bring in a restorative medical practitioner on the support team to help with what's going on. So in those cases, they like to continue to have my voice as an advocate on their plan and just to continue to speak into what they're dealing with their charts and their care plan.
My gosh, it's so extensive and complete. There's so much that you have there. And I was just listening to it. And there's a couple people I have in mind as I'm talking to you that I'm like, I know when these people are listening, they're going to be like, whoa, how do I work with her? And just because they're in this state of really wanting a baby so bad. What you just laid out so beautifully and so eloquently was this idea of really allowing peace to also flow through as they're navigating these challenges. It's not about coming from a state of pressure. When you mentioned group coaching, when you mentioned Bible studies, when you mentioned all of these things and going through the scriptures of who handled it well, who didn't, I can already in my mind, I'm like, yep, Sarah didn't do a great job and Hannah might have done a better job. But she was probably on the good end. But there's so many, like you said, so many different stories. But people get into this sense of striving, really pressure driven and not even taking a moment just to kind of breathe and get back into their body. And I think it's so beautiful that everything gets tailored unique to the individual. So if they are estrogen dominant, they do need to, what you were saying, get up, move their body, stop drinking if they are drinking. Hey, alcohol is not helping you. And then on the flip side, all the other things. So beautiful in the uniqueness of all of that. So one of the things, Becca, you mentioned too, just the scriptural, the Bible study, and how important it is to have the faith component into this. Because we can physically track everything, we can do all the dietary, the lifestyle changes, pull back stress, taking Sabbath days, and all of that. So, Becca, I know faith is a huge component in the work that you do and just in the work that I do as well. But what does it look like for a woman who's working with you to incorporate faith into their day to day?
Yeah. So, like I said, we have the faith based element and Bible study throughout the program. So, they're kind of hitting the books with Jesus as they're learning about the physical aspect of everything. And I feel so humbled and honored to be both a fertility coach and a birth doula because I get to see the full spectrum of the surrender and control element throughout the whole process of from getting pregnant, of this battle of trusting in God's timing or feeling like we're really controlling of things and trying to figure out how to surrender to that, from getting pregnant all the way in the pregnancy of controlling and fearing of losing the pregnancy at first. And then as we kind of get through that second and then into third trimester, being like, okay, well, Lord willing, we're going to have this baby. And then we kind of get controlling over the birth process and our birth plans and everything. And you've heard a bit about my birth experiences as well. But ultimately, what it comes down to, what God is asking of us as women in our fertility journeys from before getting pregnant through being pregnant, through our birth, and then through postpartum and raising the children is surrender, is letting go and letting go of that control. And I say that, of course, with upholding the responsibility of taking care of everything and learning and applying knowledge and all of these things and stewarding our temples, stewarding our bodies really well. But we have to surrender. We have to just completely surrender. And when we do that, that is when we get to grow. And that is when we get to flourish and whatever that growth looks like. But having peace and knowing that God uses our sorrow and our suffering to such a greater extent than he could ever use our happiness.
Yeah.
So when we understand that and we can get spiritually grounded and rooted in that, everything else flows so beautifully. And we can truly listen to the Lord and
Mm.
listen to what he is asking of us to do or to let go of.
So good. I say that after every question you answer, but I'm just like, my heart just smiles so big. It's so important. And it made me think about something you mentioned in your story. And if you would talk about it a little bit more, I'd love to hear. When you talked about the PPA, the postpartum anxiety, that's something that I believe a lot of women after giving birth experience, but don't have a quote title for it. They don't know that that's what's going on. I mean, we've heard of postpartum depression, people talk about that, but PPA is getting a little bit more limelight in the health and wellness space or the childbirth space, but I still feel like people are like, "What? Anxiety? Talk to me about that," especially
Yeah.
as a believer, right? We're told to don't be anxious for anything, cast your burdens upon the Lord. And I know motherhood can be obviously, I have a child of my own as well, but it can be very, I mean, you change in the process, right? Our identities, we're no longer just Dr. Brook or just Bekah. Now we're mom and now we're caring for this life. And my gosh, are we doing it right? And what's happening? Ah, talk to me about the PPA, and that's in your
Yeah.
story with that. Was that with baby number 4 after the traumatic birth?
So it was actually after baby number 2. And
Okay.
so it's so funny that we just brought that up. I'm recording for my second program, the pregnancy framework for once you get pregnant, right? And so I actually shared this story in one of the sections on the NICU because we want to kind of just be aware of unexpected things that could come up. And in my birth, I'll give the Cliff Note version of it. But in my birth with my second boy, I was borderline preeclamptic. So I wasn't diagnosed with it. But I mean, I was puffed up so hardcore. My blood pressure was going up just a teeny bit, but it wasn't diagnosed. But I was like, I need to get induced. I didn't know anything, y'all. I didn't know what a doula was. I didn't know what a midwife was. I still at that point couldn't tell you what was ovulation. I mean, this kid was a total surprise. I knew nothing. So we walk in for an induction. We go through the process. They hit me with all the highest doses of the medications humanly possible with Pitocin. That epidural was a really hard experience. And then he comes out. I get him out, let's say it like that. And let's be honest, he's on my chest and it's beautiful. He's me and my husband, and we have this sweet moment. But he is having kind of this hard time making this sound when he's breathing. It's kind of this kind of gaspy type thing.
Mhm.
And after a little while, the nurses didn't really seem concerned, but I was like, I don't think this is normal. And so I kind of got them to look at him some more. And they were like, you know what? We do think maybe he's got some fluid in his lungs. So we're going to take him off to the NICU. And at that point, I was like, "What? What's the NICU? You're gonna take him? What do you mean?" And so before I knew it, he was gone and my husband was gone, and I was all alone in that delivery room. And I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know when he was gonna come back. I didn't know anything. And he ended up being in the NICU for a couple days. He was okay, but that was a really hard experience. I never connected what I went through until I was getting that great hormone coaching from Jamie, or actually, I think I was becoming certified to become a hormone coach. And we were getting this training about where we feel trauma or anxiety or whatever in our bodies connected to a past experience. And then it clicked in me because I was dealing with whenever Micah, my son, would scream or whenever he would yell, oh my gosh, my whole body would just tense up. It would freeze up. I would feel this ball of wool in my throat. And then I finally connected. So whenever he's yelling or screaming, my body is sent back to that moment when my baby couldn't breathe well and he was taken from me. And so my body just got back into that moment. And so that's why I was dealing with this anxiety. I'd been to a couple doctors. I told them about it, or I told them how I was feeling. I don't know if I coined it in the words anxiety, but all they offered me was depression medication.
Mm.
So I just lived undiagnosed with postpartum anxiety for 18 months until I kind of had that. I was healing from my miscarriages, and then I was also healing from my anxiety. And praise God for natural stuff, y'all. Good gravy. Why didn't anybody talk about this before? But natural stuff works to help with calming things down and just healing from the inside out and getting grounded with the Lord. It's wonderful to be freed from that and understanding that.
Oh my gosh. Yes. Yes. Praise God for being freed from that for sure. And something, again, I mentioned this earlier, that you can help other women identify really early on. So you're not 18 months down the line going,
Yeah.
why didn't anybody say that a year and a half ago when I was experiencing all of these things? And for you to get to untangle all of that with the Lord and like, walk that out. I know in the day to day, in the moment to moment, you were probably just losing yourself in the process. Just hearing you talk about, and my body just gets kind of like, oh, my heart breaks. Our bodies are so wise. They're so intelligent. They do speak. You've mentioned multiple times. This is the way that God has built them with the intelligence inside of them. And unfortunately, we cannot walk through trauma unscathed and pretend that it doesn't impact our system, our nervous system, our body. It remembers. So that whole traumatic experience in the birthing room and NICU, you didn't realize got tangled up into all of these different things that were happening on the outside. And I also just recorded an episode with a friend of mine about trauma, little t
Mhm.
trauma, big T trauma. It all impacts the system and we have to work on clearing that out. So thank you so much for sharing that. I know it's not easy to talk about the things that we struggle with, but God
And
gets the
here we are.
glory.
That's
Yes, yes. But the beauty is he gets the glory in that process of us coming to the other side of that, and I just thought about something you said too about it's just in those trials, in that pressure, in the pain where it sucks, it doesn't feel good, but it's in that valley that we get to be refined, that we get to move closer to him, that we get to grow, learn him more. And I've been doing a deep dive into the Psalms, and it's just interesting. If you ask somebody, "Hey, what's the book of Psalms about?" "Oh, praising God, thanksgiving, gratitude." Yes, but there's so many Psalms out of those 150 where David's crying out, "My soul is dry and my friends are beating me up," and all these things that are real that we experience. So if any of you are feeling in that low part, go to the book of Psalms, find some peace and solace knowing you're not alone in that process. So thank you so much for sharing that, Becca.
absolutely.
Yeah. So, Becca, as we get ready to close out this episode, I love asking my guests on the show, especially since it's called Beyond Wellness Culture, for the woman listening who feels like getting pregnant naturally is just not possible for her, or that she's never going to have her heart's desire of being a mama. What would you want her to hear first out of everything you shared, or maybe even something new that you haven't shared?
Amen. I'm so glad you asked that question. That is a lie from the enemy. So if you hear that in your head, or if you believe it in your heart that maybe this just isn't possible for me, maybe I can't do this. Guys, I always point back to Sarah.
Mm.
She waited over 70 years. And I'm like, y'all, nothing is impossible for our God. He resurrected himself from the dead. He's resurrected many from the dead. He created life in a virgin. I mean, there is nothing impossible for him. And my vote is if anybody ever tells you otherwise, you run away from them, you fire them, and you never see their faces again. It makes me so mad when doctors or fertility clinics or whoever play God. When they play, you know what, this just isn't in the cards for you. You need to do XYZ. And there is a time and a place for interventions, or a time and a place for support, or a time and a place for medicine. Absolutely. I'm not against that at all. There's a time and a place for surgery. There's a time and a place for all of those things. But if someone ever plays God, they don't fear God, and they don't need your money. They don't need your time. They don't need your heart, your soul, your body, right? So work with someone like Dr. Brook, with a restorative medical practitioner, with myself, who believes in the power of our God, who believes in the power of healing, who believes in the gift of knowledge, of education and hormones and charting and all of these beautiful things that he truly, I believe he has given it to us as a gift in about the 1960s. And we can utilize that in partnership with him for healing and restoration. And we need to go that route. It is the ground. We have to work through the ground. We have to till the soil. We've got to dig up the weeds. We've got to water it. We've got to put some fertilizer on it. We've got to do all these things for the ground before we ever look up at the fruit of the tree and expect there just to be fruit when we haven't done anything to the ground. And oftentimes with standard fertility clinics or standard OBs, Dr. Brook is not your standard doctor, right? She's not. She's like, I talk about this on my podcast. I'm like, there's 3% of doctors who are awesome, and she's one of them. But most of them are not. And most of them do not work from the ground up. And they expect, well, you're not having any fruit, so let's just throw some medicine at it and see how it helps. And it doesn't fix any root issues. So my big point here is spiritually, those values are really important. And I just want to encourage your faith that nothing is impossible for our God. And you want to surround yourself with the right village who believes that as well.
So good. So good. Yes. And God calls us to partner with him. Sure. Like you said, Sarah getting pregnant, waited 70 years, and Jesus coming through Mary, holy conception, all of these things. Of course, God can do all these things, but he calls us to partner with him. And so it is working with practitioners like Becca and people that are going to help support you, that believe what you believe, that can help when your faith starts getting weary. being able to call on somebody and go, "Hey, help me walk through this," right? Remind me of who I am. Remind me that my God is bigger than this situation. And He's going to bless you in ways that you could never imagine, but you have to partner. Thank you so much, Becca. I really appreciate your time and all the time you spent with our listeners. I know this conversation is going to bless so many people. I want you to share with them where they can find you, how they can connect with you, and how they can get involved with the fertility framework.
Awesome. Thank you. So, like I said, I have a podcast for the love of hormones where we talk about your conception health and your faith in the Lord. And you can find me at bekahyawn.com. And all my stuff is there. So, Fertility Framework is there. If you happen to be in the Front Range of Colorado and need a doula, I'm there. And I would love to support you and serve you alongside Dr. Brook in your journey if that's where the Lord's calling you.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for being here. And for those of you listening, we will see you next week. Have a great one.